Hey everybody, it's Brian Asbury, and I just wanted to welcome you to today's episode. If you could, like today's episode, hit that subscribe button, and let's continue to grow the developmentally speaking brand. Today, my guest is international superstar, former TNA World Heavyweight Champion, World Tag Team Champion, X Division Champion, among many, many other titles, Mr. Alex Shelley. Alex, how are you, sir?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for taking the time out to come on today, talk a little bit about your career. I'm going to ask you a question I'm sure millions of people have asked you before, but what made you want to get into professional wrestling?
Oh man. If you live in Detroit, odds are pretty good that you have somebody who worked or works for Ford Motor Company. When I was about 10 years old, my mom got comp tickets to a WWF house show at the Palace of Auburn Hills. And I went and saw wrestling for the first time. And of course, every kid has seen it on TV. But seeing it in person, and certainly the glitz and glamour of the WWF superstars at the time, which was a new generation, instantly captivated me. And it was something I just couldn't get out of my head. It was like this weird merging of comic book characters and movies and video games and sports all in one. And to me, that was so magical.
At what age did you decide that this was something you were truly going to pursue?
I think because as a naive 10-year-old, I'm under the guise it is a sport. And certainly it is a sport. Um, from that point on, because I was an athlete growing up, both my parents were athletes, all my siblings were athletes. I thought, oh, I want to play this. I want to do this. Uh, so there was always in my subconscious, the back of my mind from that point on, yeah, I want to be a pro wrestler. I want to try pro wrestling.
How hard was it to get started in professional wrestling when you decided you were going to pursue it?
Right. That's a good question. That's something I just had a conversation about because it's changed radically. It's much easier to become a professional wrestler nowadays, uh, good, bad, and different. And really, that's true for pretty much anything. It's easier to become a lot of things nowadays because there's so much information out there as to how you can become whatever you want. Uh, when I was coming up, it was early aughts. So I started training in 2001. And it was still a somewhat guarded industry. There
Hmm.
weren't that many schools, and there was still a very old school mentality of we have to protect the business, we have to run people off if need be. And the first crop of wrestlers that were my mentors or that were senior to me, these were guys who were like laborers. These were guys who were like career electricians or plumbers, like tough guys,
Hmm.
and not necessarily super talented athletes, not necessarily gym rats, just like blue collar workers. And they were the old guard. So that was how I broke into the industry. I was shown the basics, and from then on, it was more or less up to me
Hmm.
to make the most. Yeah, and that's still the case. It's still something that I feel like people have to put a certain amount of energy and effort into if they really want to see any return on it. But that's coming from me, who always kind of baselines towards grind culture, like
Hmm.
get the reps in, do everything you can.
Now, when you started training and working your matches, did you stay in that Detroit area, or how hard was it to branch out back then? Because I don't, social media wasn't really a thing.
Right. At that point in time, the Midwest still had a pretty burgeoning indie scene, and it wasn't easy. It's never going to be easy for anybody to climb the ranks in professional wrestling, but there was work to be had, and
Hmm.
I was very fortunate to be quite young. I had a seminar the other day outside Toronto, and somebody asked me that question as far as how do you go from starting out, more or less, and getting to TV. That's such a non-linear process, but he was 35.
Hmm.
I asked his age. He asked the question. I said, honestly, for me, I was 18 years old. right? So like I still lived at home, and I'm going to community college and working a part-time job, but I could basically pick up things on a whim and go live in a car for 3 or 4 days and
Hmm.
drive to all these shows for hours and hours apart just to get experience, just to make contacts. And I wouldn't say it was easy again, but at the same time, I put the effort in.
Hmm.
Myself and Jimmy Jacobs traveled together every weekend for like probably 2 years straight, and not being tied down to anything else. In terms of having a family or career, certainly served me well. But again, I was a proper teenager, so make of that what you will.
Hmm. When do you feel you started getting your name out there?
I mean, I was pretty lucky that I was in companies that had good exposure, um, probably from 2003 on.
Hmm.
And uh, back then, exposure was everything, right? Like, so you appeal to this niche market of really, really hardcore wrestling fans. But at the same time, these were all the upper echelon independents. And I just did my best. I was respectful to everybody. I did what I was told to do. I showed up. I worked hard. I practiced during the week. I tried to work out. Um, I just did what I was told I had to do to get to the next level as much as I could or as best I could. And slowly but surely, my name got out there more and more. And probably by 2003, 2004, I was working a lot of the better independent companies that were available.
How did you get your start in Ring of Honor? Because especially back then, Ring of Honor was the place to be with that crop of talent where you guys were all there. That's what everybody I truly feel like aspired to be was all of you guys during that time period.
Yeah, I would agree. So 2003, Jimmy Jacobs and I had a 30-minute Ironman match for Ian Rotten, IWA Mid South, which was a huge launch pad for a lot of great wrestlers. And CM Punk was in Ring of Honor. You can actually see it, like at the end of the match, they're following me to the back. I think I lost, but Punk comes up and puts his arm around me, and he said, "That match was fucking awesome. I'm gonna take it to Gabe at Ring of Honor." Like, oh, that'd be cool, awesome. And I was really fortunate to have Punk and Cabana and Hero directly above me. Like those were the guys that I got to go to for advice, and I looked up to those guys so much. I was setting up rings for them um, in 2002, like right after I debuted, and before I debuted as well. Um, they didn't remember me from Adam at that point, but a year later, I'm working alongside them, and they're the guys who have worked with the Eddie Guerreros and the Rey Mysterio Juniors and William Regals and the Fit Finleys and Dave Taylors. Like these are the guys who have like been around the guys who really know what's up. So you just try and absorb as much knowledge, secondhand or firsthand, as much as you can.
Hmm. Is there any particular moments that stand out more than others during your initial run with Ring of Honor?
Oh man, um, there's quite a few. I think the one that probably resonates the most as far as what people remember and what I know I was very excited about was the formation of Generation Next. And that was at a time when Ring of Honor um, had lost a lot of top talent. So they decided to push younger talent, as all wrestling companies do. And it was very much a make or break situation for me as a performer and an athlete, but also for a lot of my friends. And had that not gone well, I don't know what my future in Ring of Honor would have looked like, but maybe the company as a whole would have looked a little bit different too.
Hmm. So you found success in Ring of Honor, and you guys were getting over, and you were growing so much. Your names were out there. Is that what led to you transitioning to TNA?
Yeah, having a bit of notoriety, and then TNA kind of aggressively scouting X
Hmm.
Division talent at the time. This is 2004, mind you. Uh, Led to me getting an opportunity there. It's it hurt that Scott Demore, who was my trainer and somebody I still go to for advice today, um, I've known him since I was 18 years old. Um, So he advises me on so many things. And one of them was a TNA tryout. And he said, I really think you should come down here if you can get work off tomorrow. And he actually said, I'll take care of the plane ticket. Don't worry about it. Okay, awesome. So I flew down and I had a tryout in Orlando, and they had just gotten to Orlando.
Mm-hmm.
I think they had done one TV taping there the week prior. My tryout match was myself, Matt Bentley, who was Shawn Michaels' cousin. Michael
Mm-hmm.
Shane was, and Roderick Strong. We were on one team, and against us was Chris Sabin, Elix Skipper, and Hector Garza. And that was especially exciting for me. Not just to be in a new environment, not just to have this opportunity, but to wrestle against Hector Garza, who to this day is one of my absolute favorite wrestlers and somebody that I watched growing up and somebody that I just thought was so different and so unique. And I borrowed so much from him. And actually to be in the ring with him and absorb that knowledge firsthand, even if it was just a tryout match, it went like 8 to 10 minutes, was really, really exciting for me because I'll never pass up an opportunity to learn, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we're perpetually learning, in my opinion, if you want to be successful in pro wrestling. So every opportunity, you grab the bull by the horns.
Absolutely. How was that early years of TNA? Because seeing TNA grow over time, you can see how it changes and evolves. The focus on that X division back then was so important. I felt, and seeing all that amazing talent get the spotlight because it felt like, oh, if you're not 6'3", 250, you'll never do anything. But then the X division comes along and it was just amazing. It was amazing talent. You guys all put that on the map. So how was it building that division up?
It's tough to say. That particular run, I wasn't there that long. I was there maybe, let's see, maybe 6 months. And then what I did was, because I wasn't being used on TV for a little bit,
Hmm.
there was a change of bookers. And this happens quite frequently. But bookers will switch over and you'll see them favor certain talent as they would. Like that's a perfectly normal thing to do. Um, Certainly you're expected to try something new, right? Like there's
Hmm.
probably not a change of bookers because everything's been perfect, right? Like typically the parent company wants to see a new direction. So Dusty Rhodes became the booker and he took the X Division in a different uh, path altogether. And uh, the product was good while he was the booker. There's no doubt about it. But there were a lot of X Division guys too, and I was low man on the totem pole. So I took it upon myself to do my best to try and get to Japan.
Hmm.
And Rick, I'll never forget this, took me over there. And if it weren't for him, I wouldn't have got my job in Zero One Max. And that changed me as a wrestler quite a bit. So I came back, ironically, when Scott Demore and Mike Tenay, I believe, were booking. And this would have been in July of 2005. And they definitely had like a more prioritized X Division, might be a good way to put it. And they had broken down some of the barriers between heavyweight and X Division wrestlers. So you see a lot of intermingling
Hmm.
for a few months there. It was cool. Um, and they were equally aggressive with bringing in new talent too. So that was when Roderick Strong came in and Austin Aries and Jay Lethal. And I thought that that was when the X Division really started to mm, kind of settle itself. Like Samoa Joe came in, right? Like when
Hmm.
Joe came in, that was a big deal. To see a guy that size move so well. So we got the Spike TV deal after that, and that was when I think a lot of people really started to like bite on the X Division because you had CD, Chris Daniels, AJ, and Joe at the top of it, and I mean the stuff they were doing was just so awesome. All three of those guys are so immensely talented. But right behind them, you had guys like Chris Sabin and Petey Williams and Jay Lethal and Sanjay Dutt. And like those guys are immensely talented too, right?
Hmm.
So it's not like there was this separation of church and state, right? Like it
Hmm.
wasn't like here's the top, here's the lower card guys. Talent wise, everybody was very, very gifted. And I think that was truly when the X Division started to kind of make an imprint on a lot of people's minds. And we wouldn't really see that imprint play out for probably another like at least 10 years, I'd say. When you got this generation of people in the mid 2010s who like grew up on the X Division and now
Hmm.
they're coming in style of everything that's being done. And you hear it now more than probably ever. But yeah, I grew up on the X division. I love the X division, and that's a big deal now. The TNA is back, especially a brand name. People associate the X division with TNA, like they are absolutely symbiotic. And I think if it weren't for the X division, um, certainly you might have a couple generations of wrestlers who may have tuned out of
Hmm.
TNA and instead too. The alternative at the time was WWF, which prioritized a certain body type and a
Hmm.
certain wrestling style. And again, that's okay too. It's never a bad thing for the viewer to have choices, but you can see, certainly in hindsight, um, what really seemed to imprint itself upon young wrestlers' minds and influence the way they did things.
Hmm. Absolutely. And with you going to Japan and then working with TNA, and then you did some more stuff with Ring of Honor. Those three companies I felt like is the perfect mixture for someone like yourself to keep working and growing and expanding. And uh,
And like let me just say one thing too. Like I look back on it now. I was only 20, 21, like
mhm,
when I'm doing this, right? I would literally my schedule. I was just telling this to somebody the other day, but I'm 21 years old, and my schedule is go to Japan for 2 weeks, come back home, go straight to TNA. That weekend, go to Ring of Honor. Next weekend, go back to TNA. Next weekend, Ring of Honor. Next month, go back to Japan. And I did that for like a year. And that was just such incredible training. Like everybody asks me about where the best wrestling school is. And I tell them every time best wrestling schools in Japan.
mhm.
If you can get to Japan, go there and stay there for a long time if you're a young wrestler and you're able to.
And why is it so important to you for Japan? What's
Yeah,
so
so I think
different?
it's right, right. I think part of it's a human experience, right? And what I mean by that is travel is good for you. If you're relatively well rounded, travel is only going to give you more perspective and more insight and more experiences. And it's something that I learned you're literally at the mercy of people's kindness.
Hmm.
And you just learn how to intrinsically embed yourself in the culture if you want to be there, and how to communicate in terms of pro wrestling without necessarily speaking a language. And that's truly, in my experience, like a lot of the success in pro wrestling is definitely due to the more sublime things people do. It's whether or not they're having fun. It's whether or not they have instincts. It's whether or not they've been in a situation before. It's whether or not they've been challenged. It's whether or not they've been able to learn from other people. So you get this experience as a wrestler that's absolutely invaluable because again, there's a huge language barrier. Again, it's a totally different style. Again, you're expected to train in a different way than you were back home, but on a more humanitarian focal point, you end up eating the weird foods and you end up fighting off the jet lag and you end up existing and hopefully thriving in this culture that can be quite challenging for
Hmm.
you to thrive in. And there's a reason that so many young Japanese wrestlers get sent abroad. It's for seasoning, but it's also to just give them these perspectives and to make them realize how good they have it at some point in time when they're a superstar, and just to really, really give them like a wider, more panoramic viewpoint rather than the tunnel vision they would get if they just stayed in one country.
Hmm. I worked a little bit when Gabe left and then formed Dragon Gate USA. I was on the production team, so I got to work with a little bit
Okay.
of the Japanese talent. It was so they're so respectful, and it really is a different culture and like a different way of wrestling. I remember one time Chuck Taylor, we were in Philly, and they were smacking him, and he's like, "Okay, enough!" He was like screaming as they were going in on it, and he's like, "I can't do it no more." Like it's just it's a sometimes it is that hard hitting style that
Yeah.
some other people are not used to with wrestling here.
Yeah. 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 The wrestling is very physical. You look at what a lot of the national sports over there are, it's a more combat centric culture,
Hmm.
right? Uh, as far as like karate and sumo and certainly judo and jiu-jitsu are very popular over there, right?
Mm.
Whereas you look at the main forms of like combat sports here, and for the longest time it was pugilism, it was
Mm-hmm.
boxing, right? And amateur wrestling wasn't especially popular. Like in other parts of the world, like Greco-Roman wrestling, freestyle wrestling, folk wrestling, these are wildly popular sports, right? But here, we've got our big four,
Mm-hmm.
and I think because of that, we're less combat driven. But that's probably changing,
Mm-hmm.
with the current times. Again,
I,
everybody knows somebody who does Brazilian Jiu Jitsu now.
that's true. How did the Motor City Machine Guns get formed?
Good question. Also in Japan, actually. So in my year-long tour for Zero One from about 2005 up until 2006, they had these NWA Junior Heavyweight Tag Team titles, and originally the champions were Leonardo Spanky, who was Brian Kendrick, and there was a wrestler in WCW for many years who was immensely talented in Kaz Hayashi. Okay,
Mhm.
they were the champions, and on my first tour, Kaz could not make it to one of the defenses, so they slotted me in, and it was Spanky and I against this team called Skull and Bones, and it was Ikuto Hidaka and Minoru Fujita. So Hidaka and Fujita. And Hidaka and Fujita had been a team for a long time, on and off, but they had teamed in smaller companies like Michinoku Pro and Battle Arts, and now they're teaming in Zero One Max. And they're really, really, really good. Hidaka was actually in the original ECW for a brief period of time. So we lost the belts to them. They were the new champions. And these guys went on to have just a bitch in 2005, man. Like it was like
Mm-hmm.
a really strong year for them. They might have won Tag Team of the Year in Japan from Tokyo Sports. I think they won the Differ Cup that year. I could be wrong on that, but they certainly went far. Um, they ended up in the finals against Kenta and Marufuji. They wrestled all over the place, all these different companies, and they were phenomenal. Um, Hidaka, especially to me, is one of the most underrated junior heavyweights of all time. So it came up again that I would challenge. And this time they had me team with Sanjay Dutt, and we lost. And they said, okay, we're going to bring you over for our junior heavyweight tournament. It's called the Tenkaichi. So number one in the world. They give you Dragon Balls. So it's elimination. After you lose, whoever beat you gets their Dragon Ball. By the end, somebody has all 8 Dragon Balls. Idea being they can summon a wish after that. Pretty cool concept. But
Mm-hmm.
um, Saban and I were both out, and they ended up having us challenge Hidaka and Fujita at the main event of Korakuen Hall. This was August of 2006, and we beat them. We beat them for these NWA Junior Heavyweight Tag titles. So we really thought like we might just be a one and done team because these guys are superstars and they're probably going to whip our ass. And they did whip our ass, but at the same time, we still won. And the office said, okay, take these titles and go back to the US and Canada and defend them. And then we'll bring you back to Japan to defend them too. And we'll just see how this goes. And that's exactly what happened. So we defended them at this company called UWA in Toronto. That was where I first met Okada because they partnered with Toryumon, Asahi San's school in Mexico. We defended them in PWG. Um, and we would go back to Japan every so often and defend them there too. And we had those belts for another almost 2 years, like a year and a half. We lost them in April of 2008, but that was how we got reps as a tag team and really figured it out, or started to. Uh, Eventually, there came a point in TNA where we had a cage match, and it was a 5-way X Division cage match. It was at the Lockdown pay per view in 2007 in St. Louis, Missouri. And there were 2 bad guys in this match, and it was me and Saban. And we were against Sanjay, Shark Boy, and Jay Lethal. And it just seemed natural that we would use our tag team moves.
Mm-hmm.
So we did, but at the same time, I don't think anybody really expected us to do any sort of tag team moves. When they saw them for the first time, it was like, wait, what's going on? Like, how did these guys do that? Right. So it was like we had been teaming for a year and a half at this point, and like we had some pretty cool stuff we could do, but nobody knew. So it was just like in our back pocket. So literal ace in our sleeve, and we just played it. And after that, the circumstances so aligned that um, Austin Aries, who I was working with quite a bit, left the company, and they basically plugged Saban into his spot. Okay, so here you go, Motor City Machine Gun, and it happened to take off over the next few months. We got pretty popular.
I'd say you were more than pretty popular. Everybody loved the Motor City Machine Guns. Is there any particular moment for the machine guns that stand out more than others during your run there in TNA?
Um, we had a lot of really great moments. The first match we had with Team 3D, I really, really like.
Hmm.
I really think it helped put us on the map. And working against them or a tag team of that quality who had done what they've done, to me, that's one of my favorite tag matches. Um, we what else did we do? Like we had a couple matches that were we were like almost sprinkled in. And they were multi-man matches. Like we had one where it was like maybe a battle royal with tag teams, but it came down to us and AJ Styles and Tomko. It was
Hmm.
really good. Um, we had the reverse battle royal, which a lot of people hate. I thought the gimmick was actually pretty fun to do, but at the same time, we did well in that. Um, we had this is in 2008, but we had one of my absolute favorite matches against Speed Muscle, Naruki Doi and Masato Yoshino,
Hmm.
this tag team from Dragon Gate, who were just so incredible. Like to this day, Doi's one of my favorite wrestlers. Yoshino's retired, but I mean that tag match is like forever stuck in my mind. And then of course, like we're getting further along, but the Bucks and Beer Money, I
Hmm.
can't not say that.
I couldn't agree more. When you guys formed that tag team, and I think the top two teams, in my opinion, were yourself and Beer Money. Were like just at this. Everybody loved those two teams in TNA.
Yeah, yeah, and there weren't like that many teams to be
Hmm.
honest with you, or it kind of like undulated a bit. Of course, we ended up like working with the British Invasion quite a bit, and that
Hmm.
was awesome. They had LAX for a period of time. They had Jimmy Rave and Lance Hoyt, who were actually really, really underrated as a team. But it was like you always had kind of not many teams,
Hmm.
maybe four or five. I would say. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not like some of the like deeper divisions
Hmm.
that you there. You might get some thrown together teams too, but it wasn't like I don't know. Some of the tag divisions now are very, very, very thick, and I,
Hmm.
I enjoy that. I think it's cool.
Skipping ahead a little bit, when you left TNA and then when you appeared on NXT, how did that come about?
Sure. So what I had done was, oh man, by this point I had gone to medical school.
Hmm.
I graduated with my bachelor's. And I was working in the field. So I started working in medicine full time in 2019, um, springtime. So about 5 years ago. Um, and I was going to come back to wrestling. So I slowly started coming back, worked for Ring of Honor. And then WWE asked me if I would like to come down and be a performance coach for a week. And with Ring of Honor's blessing, they said, yep, go ahead. So I went down there for a week and I had a really, really great experience. Really, really great experience. Um, they kind of asked me if I would be interested in doing this more.
Hmm.
And I said, I appreciate the offer, but at the same time, I still want to wrestle, right? Like by that point, I was only 34, 35. So I just got back into wrestling, and this was so cool. And I love seeing how everything worked, and I hope I helped some people. But yeah, I still want to work. And they ended up coming, and this was all in October, right? So by December, though, they reached out again. They said, "Hey, would you be interested in wrestling?" And I said, "Yeah, sure. Like, what's the plan, right? What do you have in mind?" And they said, "We want to team you with Kushida." And I was so happy they said that. I was so happy they said that because Evolve and
Hmm.
WWE work together, and I got to surprise Kushida, like legitimate surprise on a show near my home. Uh, Came out in a mask and everything, and like took it off in the ring. I really don't think he knew what was going on. I know he didn't know what was going on. So Gabe Sapolsky and I kept that super, super secret, and I hadn't seen him in years. And I became very acutely aware when I went back to school for medicine and I left Ring of Honor because my contract expired. Like, man, I might like I don't know if I'll see a lot of my
Mhm.
friends again. Like these people I'm so close with, you see them every day for months on end. Like they're just gone. They're into the
Mhm.
ether, and that's kind of one of the hardest parts about wrestling. Um, but they asked me to come back, and they said, "Would you be interested in doing these house shows before TV?" And I said, "Absolutely." They're like, "Oh, it'd be a good chance for you to get some reps in and see what we're all about." And I had such a great time, and WWE treated their athletes so well. I don't have a crossword to say about it. It was just such a great experience. It really was.
Was it just supposed to be everything that we saw, or was there going to be more? Was it just the
Uh,
tournament?
No, no, good question. They did approach me about a contract after, and I said, "Well, I already have these other dates agreed to for Ring of Honor, and like WWE's great about like letting people
Hmm.
finish out or anything like that." I said, "Okay, let's stay in touch, and then let's try and figure out something that could work for you here." And we were very, very far along as that went. Um, and I was still talking to Ring of Honor, and I believe I was talking to Scott Demore, who was running Impact at the time too. And this is only in a matter of, gosh, I'd say maybe we're talking like 6 weeks, maybe 6 weeks after I was on TV with Kushi, uh, that coronavirus came around
Hmm.
and the pandemic, and I started to see it pretty quick. Like we had these conference calls with a lot of the doctors in our company. So yeah, you're seeing things on media, but we're getting different reports of things.
Hmm.
And I, yeah, it was like, geez, man, like this is going to be really bad. I think. So I think like from end of February, March on, end of February was the last match I had for a while. First week of March, I was like, oh man, like this
Hmm.
is this is really not good. As soon as Corona hit, and I saw the entertainment industry just like do one of these, and everything was up in the air. I'm like, this seems like a bad time for me
Hmm.
to make a major life change because I don't know what's going to happen. And then you look at what happened,
Hmm.
and yeah, the economy just bottomed out. It was like, man, good, bad, and different. Again, using that statement, that I don't know if I made the right call or not, but I made a call, and I still worked all the way through the pandemic. Like I never took a day off.
Hmm.
We were full time, and like it was intimidating, and it wasn't comfortable for quite a while. But I just felt that it was probably safer to hedge my bets there, just because who
Hmm.
knows what's going to happen, right?
Hmm. When so you ultimately you returned to TNA wrestling, and how was so when you came back to TNA, how was that? Because you've always been
Yeah, that was.
through. Go ahead, sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. That was great. I came back, reformed Motor City Machine Guns right out of the rip. We won the tag titles almost immediately,
Hmm.
and it was an awesome experience. Just see the different coat of paint on the company too.
Hmm. And then you rise and you go, and then you finally win the world title. How was that feeling?
Oh, dude, I mean that like that in and of itself. There was a point where COVID was so weird
Yeah.
in terms of like how it was, um, and I'm not saying it was handled poorly. It was just very traumatic for a lot of people, right? Because it was a lot of ups and downs, and we don't know what's going on and variants. And okay, and I'm still working in medicine, so they had set up the open door match with AEW,
Hmm.
uh, and like the Forbidden Door now busted wide open, and it was going to be Motor City Machine Guns and Rich Swann against Good Brothers and Kenny. And I had to pull out of that because my company mandated inoculations like right at the same time, and I was still working in physical therapy, and I was like, oh gosh, I should do this, right? Like I have to do this. Um, and it was like very stressful the amount of tests I took to make sure I wasn't a carrier. And it's like, if I am, I have to quarantine for X amount of time, so I'm not a contagion to my patients. Like it was really, really stressful. So that happened in January, and um, like it took a long time for me to get my inoculation in Michigan. Like even as a medical provider, I don't
Mm-hmm.
think I ended up getting it not until like the springtime. So I was gone from TNA, like for all intents and purposes. I came back to the Indies in the fall of 2021, and I thought, okay, like this is it. Like I'm really gonna bust my ass, and I'm gonna like start from the ground up and show everybody that I can like still fucking go.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that mentality is important for people who don't necessarily get what they want out of wrestling, right? Like you get to write the end of your story, and even if it doesn't work out the way that you want it to, you at least went out on your terms. You did
Mm-hmm.
everything you could. And I think there's a certain sense of solace in knowing that. So after about 6 months, and I was doing pretty well on the Indies, TNA asked me to come back, or Impact, and I came back. First match back was against Jay White, one of my favorite matches. And from there, I just worked my ass off. Just worked my ass off. And I'm still working full time in PT at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So in 2022, and this sounds ridiculous and it sounds fake, and I swear it's not because I lived it. I had 8 days off, 8 days off the whole year. I worked 40 hours a week, and I had over 100 matches. And that was when, around the beginning of 2023, Impact was going to offer me a contract, and I thought, I got to sign this because it just doesn't seem sustainable for me to do this for another year. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm no wrestling in the world can be this hard, right? Like what I put on myself, and that was when I was all in with Impact, and eventually worked my way to the world title, and just to have the hard work pay off. I'm sorry, this is a long way around
No.
for you to get your answer, but to get the point where like you actually did it because you worked so hard and you just didn't give up, and everybody was there rooting you on and supporting you, um, and just amplifying what you were already doing was just an incredible feeling. Like that made everything worth it in a lot of ways. I really felt like there's some sense of justice in the world.
Mm-hmm. You can tell that you're passionate about professional wrestling, and I love that. And no matter what the obstacle was, you can see that this is something you love. What does TNA wrestling mean to you? Because it was your home for so long, through every different. As it grew, Alex Shelley was there at some point.
Yeah, I've been there through a lot of stages, and I think ultimately what the legacy of the company will be, or what I hope it ends up being, is just a place that people can go and they can learn.
Hmm.
Um, I think it's got an excellent position in this industry for young wrestlers to learn. And there's so many great minds who are going to be associated with it. And it does put out a product where people are giving you everything they've got. Like people work incredibly hard there. And it's very much a wrestling product.
Hmm.
I look back on the past 2 years, and rarely do you see matches given the amount of time that TNA will provide. And again, I just can't emphasize enough. This is where you have a very good chance of seeing like superstars of tomorrow or people reinventing themselves. And I really, really love the company. I do.
With you've been a world champion, X Division, world tag team. You've held titles all around. Is there anything else you'd still like to accomplish in wrestling before?
Yeah, I, that's that's a really loaded question. Saban and I have had these conversations where we talk about we've done some pretty cool shit,
Hmm.
like simply put. And at this point, I think obviously accomplishing a lot of the same things I've done previously in a new company,
Hmm.
and swimming in new waters would be very exciting. The other thing that's equally important to me is showing up to work and being enthused, like loving pro wrestling and understanding that this is very much a gift. Like
Hmm.
the fact that I'm able to do this, physically do this, and then the fact that I'm able to financially benefit from this, uh, is massive.
Hmm.
This is my, and it doesn't really matter what's going on in my life. When I start to think about pro wrestling, when I actually start to think about the wrestling aspect of it, everything else fades away. It just kind of like titrates down and diminishes versus something that might be a job that you do where you just have these stressors that yeah they're in the back of your mind always, right? Like because it's not your passion. The job you're doing is not your passion. This is my passion. um, and as an asterisk there, like helping others is paramount to me.
Hmm.
I love helping people. I really do. And I find that helping them helps me too. It helps me be better. It helps me become a better teacher. It helps me sharpen my skills. And I hope that doesn't come across as being selfish because I'm helping them in an effort to like get them going, right? Like,
Hmm.
let's make you better too. Um, but I really do enjoy that aspect of pro wrestling as well.
I I appreciate everything that you've done for professional wrestling and what you continue to do. Your passion,
Thank you.
it's there. Everybody can see it, they can feel it. You just from the short time that we've talked, you can tell you're one of the good ones, and you want to give back.
Thanks.
Um, so wherever you go, whatever you do, you deserve it. And
Thanks,
I
man.
appreciate everything that you've done for professional wrestling.
Thank you so much.
If there's any advice you could give to anybody getting into professional wrestling, what would it be?
Uh, to kind of come full circle, remember, people would kill to be able to have one match.
Hmm.
I've seen people try for months at pro wrestling training just to learn how to run the ropes, and they're just not able to do it. They
Hmm.
physically cannot do it. So it's easy for people, especially naturals of pro wrestling, to kind of take for granted how easy it may come to them. Please understand that what you're doing every time you have a match, that's somebody's dream.
Hmm.
Like they would be so and so content with a part of their life if they were just able to accomplish that one thing. And the odds are pretty good that any of the wrestlers who are listening to this get to do it every weekend, multiple times a week. If you kind of keep that humility about you and that perspective that this again is a gift, I think it'll serve you very well because life isn't easy and there's going to be frustrations and things aren't fair. But at the same time, this is something you get to do, not something you have to do.
I couldn't agree more. I feel like a lot of people's issue when it comes to wrestling is they're just so worried about the destination that they forget to have fun along the way.
Yeah, and that's a human condition. It's easy to do. And sometimes you just need a reminder.
Hmm. Thank you again for taking the time to come out today, sir. Where can people reach out to you at?
Alex Shelley 313, same thing on Twitter. Um, Hit me up on either.
If there's anything I can ever do, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much. Had a great
Th-
time.
Thank you, sir.